And we're back on another exciting episode of Starfleet So Hail, where we have a casual and informal conversation about Star Trek. Today we're focused on Star Trek Strange New World, Season 2, Episode 2, Ad Astra Per Aspera. Am I saying it right? Do you know how to
No,
say
you're
it?
not. It's Ad Astra Per Aspera.
It's Per Aspera. Okay.
At least that's what number one said.
Oh, she does, right? She does say it like that. You're right. It's been I have to admit, I haven't seen this episode in a couple of weeks. I didn't rewatch it for today's discussion, but I
We
have
can
it
tell
pretty
people that.
No, it's all right. It's all right. I know. Yeah, we just watched it, right? Like
Yeah, it's
today.
really from the memory here.
But I do have very strong memories of this one because it was pretty impactful episode. But anyways, I'm super happy to be joined by my friend Robbie. Nice to see you, Robbie. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going well. Got a holiday soon, so
Good,
that
good,
should be
good.
nice. And we've had a couple of problems, folks, trying to get this streamlined up. So apologies if it's late on behalf of Sohail because of some
Thank you.
problems on my end.
Mine too. Remember there was like one case where I had to. Anyways, it doesn't matter, audience. The magic is that in a year from now, no one's gonna notice because they'll just be like, "Oh, this is the next episode," and they're not gonna care. So we have to think of our audience that's not just tuning in today, but our future audience as well. So, oh, and in that, by the way, welcome, future audience. Nice to see you. Nice to hear you, or nice for you to see us and hear us. I don't know. We don't really hear you. Anyways, I'm excited to talk about this episode because it was pretty impactful, and I feel like it made a really big impression on me. Uh, and we'll see how you feel about it. But I also saw online that it had a really great reception. So I think this is a true hit as far as Strange New Worlds is concerned. And I think it's a big hit, like a series hit, like that kind of thing. So, anyways, we can talk about that in more detail. But Robbie, would you like me to do as quick as possible our traditional episode summary here, or should we just skip right into our opening thoughts? What do you think?
I mean, it's up to you, but I feel like this is going to be a 10-minute kind of
I think I
deal.
can do it in 2 minutes. Do you want to see if I can really do it in two
Is
minutes?
that a
Like
challenge?
maybe in like 3 sentences I can do it. Ready? Last season, Una is arrested for lying on her
It doesn't
Starfleet
sound like he's
application.
reading it at all, does it?
No, I'm not reading it. I swear. But I do have that way of sounding like that. It's true.
No, I've got
Last
notes. I'm
season.
not. I'm not cutting.
Oh, I have notes too. Where's my notebook? I have
Don't
them
know
in
where
my
I'd be
brain.
without them.
Well, it's a good thing you have notes. Anyways, last season on Strange New Worlds, Una got arrested for lying that she's an Illyrian and that she's genetically modified, which is totally against the um, laws in the Federation because of the eugenics wars. So we finally get the trial episode that everyone was anticipating from last year, and we find out that Una has this friend. Her name is Nira, and she and Nira are estranged for like 20 years because Una's family could blend in and fit in, whereas Nira's family, I guess, or Nira could not in terms of their genetic modifications. So it created a rift between them. But in order to get her the best defense, Nira happens to be like one of the best civil rights attorneys in the quadrant, or in the quadrant, basically. So remember last episode, Pike was off to do something personal to go get Una some help. Well, this is it. Pike arrives on. Oh, I've already done more than 3 sentences. Look at me. I'm already.
I'm
I'm
not
already
counting.
feeling. All right, hold on. So Pike fetches Nira. They bring her back to the Federation. She defends the hell out of Una and wins. But it doesn't change anything really because uh, they end up making an exception through a small clause, basically, or like a loophole. So it doesn't change the law, but it does make it possible for Una's crimes to be forgiven and for her to be able to serve once more on the Enterprise.
It's kind of funny that this episode says that it's a start for these kind of cases, but we know that all the way until the 24th century in DS9 times, the Bashir's gonna have problems with this.
Yeah, totally.
So we don't even know the Illyrian status that far. and we never probably will.
Right, right. I don't, you know, that's the thing about prequels is there's always going to be like cool stuff that's new, and then you're like, well, they don't mention it again in the future. But I'd like to believe maybe we'll get a follow-up in Prodigy or Lower Decks. Who knows? Because they are talking to each other, so maybe there'll be something big on one of those shows, or possibly, well, Discovery's so far in the future that like it would be a shame if like they kept those rules all the way into the 32nd century. And I have the impression that they don't, because in the 32nd century, it's kind of a weird place, but there's definitely photonic beings, right? Like there's definitely a lot of holograms hanging around in the Federation, or at least one. We saw Eli. No, we saw a couple actually, I think. Maybe a few. But yeah, so I'm hoping that by Picard's time that the synth ban isn't the only thing that's been reformed, in terms of these kinds of things. What are your thoughts on genetic manipulation in general, like in modern in current times? Like what are your feelings
Mm.
on messing with genes? Like, for example, if you could have like a super immune system, just no side effects, it would be a very simple procedure. Would you alter your genome to have that ability, for example?
Well, it depends. I quite like when you get sick and you get a day off work. That's not bad.
I never
Um,
thought of it that way, but that's like a really good reason to
I
still
mean,
get sick.
how often do we get I don't get sick very often anyway, so I wouldn't really see the reason to get a super immune system, it's not like
Well, you would be immune from things like cancer, all kinds of bugs, like or not just like the common cold, but every disease basically that you could get, chicken pox, you name it, you would never be ill. You would be 100% every day.
what, I'm not too much against immunity and that kind of stuff, but I feel like it's when we get into physical aspects that's kind of scary because as soon as you start changing one thing, you know, it's going to be something else. People already are, struggling because of social media and the kind of, you know, body image that often promotes following loads of celebrities that juice up or have Botox or, whatever kind of surgery. Um, you have adverts where people's faces are smoothed. So there's this whole kind of culture um, where people are made to feel lesser if they don't look a certain way. Um, and I feel like genetic manipulation would mostly be not for the physical health benefits, it would be for, how you look.
You think that
Um,
humans would be superficial about it, and like everyone would want to be like ripped and cut and look like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
like they could. Yeah, it's a really good,
Because
interesting,
the people that would
interesting
have the
point.
access to that would be rich. And
You're absolutely right, actually. That's true. Yeah, it would be kind of messed up. Like, it's true. The rich would keep getting richer. Um, that's an interesting way of looking at it, and certainly that, and including like a heightened intelligence, for example. So physical prowess, increasing your physical prowess, heightened intelligence. You could see a superb immune system. You could actually see how all of that could lead to a subrace of humans that felt like they were superior to non-genetically modified humans, and then how that kind of snowballed into what we know for the eugenics wars in universe in Star Trek. But you could see that being a reality in our reality, in real life as well, because certainly I don't think humans are mature enough to handle genetic manipulation, unlike the Illyrians, which I think they are. Like, I think they're different from us. They never went to war with each other. They never, they use their genetic manipulation, as Una said last season, to be in harmony with their surroundings or with nature. So, for example, in this episode we see Nira being able to, and ton of Illyrians being able to breathe this like inhospitable atmosphere that Pike would choke and die under, and stuff like that. So that's where the Illyrians use it for.
Yeah, I really wish we'd got more Illyrian backstory. It would really make me feel a lot more for the Illyrians. It's the same kind of problem with the Denobulans and Enterprise, they give us Phlox and then kind of retcon that this was a species that we never really see in the future.
Yeah.
But I feel like
We got a Denobulan in the next episode, by the way.
and I didn't even recognize it was a Denobulan. Um,
I'll
I
point
feel
him
like
out to you.
I agree with you about the Illyrians, because we don't know what they really look like. We know that Una well, I suppose we saw in the flashback they look human,
Yeah, they're
apparently.
humanoids. They look
Yeah,
very
and
human
on
at this
planet
point.
as well.
Yeah.
But the way they've been shown to use it is to not to connect, but to connect to the Federation, to
Yeah.
kinda to harmonize. They're not using it for themselves. Well, I suppose they are in a way, but they're using it
Well,
to
they are,
branch
but
out.
to yeah, but like, certainly Una is exemplary, right? She has definitely got like a supreme kind of intelligence. She's strong, she's fit, and she's got that
She
amazing
has
immune
fit.
system, right? Um, and that to a lot of human, and because she's Illyrian, I guess like they're like, okay, fine. The Federation actually told the Illyrians on her colony that, because it gets a little more interesting with Una in particular, because Una Una's family uphold a tradition of genetic manipulation. And I thought that was an interesting twist that they put in here, is like taking this scientific thing of like, modifying the genome and really making it somehow part of a culture. And so like traditional, so she was born into this system and had no choice. But the Federation are saying, if you abandon that tradition, you can be a member of the Federation. And so that's what happened, is her family could fit in. They could look like they abandoned the tradition, but a lot of other families couldn't. And I'm just trying to imagine what the other genetic kind of manipulations could be, but like there's probably a lot of obvious things, like maybe that Una doesn't have. But a lot of Illyrians, just like we saw in last season, probably did give up their genetics or try to reverse their genetic enhancements, which would lead to other issues and stuff like that. And it makes me feel the same way, and I think Pike feels this way too. But it makes me feel the same way about the Federation. And Nira actually says something. She's like, maybe the Federation becomes unknowingly like a persecutor, because they're so steadfast about this law that like they don't even consider that there could be a culture of people that use this technology in a appropriate manner. They just think that like because of the horrors that occurred on Earth, that like it should be outlawed altogether everywhere.
And the beauty of it is you can see this. People were complaining that this story was too broad. A lot of the past Trek courtroom episodes were very kind of specific, measure of a man, sentience, rights, um, you know, whereas this one was a bit broader. It was kind of tapping to a wider audience, and I kind of like that. I feel like you could say, "Oh, that's kind of cowardly to not um, hone in on a specific niche," but I think it's pretty good because you could see this episode as uh, a kind of an allegory for changing yourself for a friendship. Let's say you have a friend who maybe you don't have many friends, and you have a friend who kind of is not great, and he's kind of you change because of that friend, or you can and get into bad behavior. You could see it as in the army. I think it was until 2000. You couldn't be gay,
Right,
publicly
right. Don't
gay,
ask,
and
don't
within the
tell. Yeah,
army.
exactly. Those kind of things.
Um,
Yeah.
and so it taps to a whole wide audience, and I saw a lot of people really kind of resonating with that online. And I definitely resonated with it because we can all relate to some form of isolation, um, and having felt different, and we're kind of it's drilled into us that that's wrong or that's, weird when you have to embrace these things, talking about genetic modification, um, unless it can be used to help you maybe if you have, um maybe you're physically disabled in some way, I don't think it should be used to change, you know, your kinda spirit, who you are, um, for
Yeah,
superficial.
and it's weird that the Federation would hold on to this like kind of, you know, belief so ardently when again, there's all these like the whole point is to find, new civilizations, and this is a civilization that is different from the Federation. It had a different experience and stuff like that. So it is interesting. I like that they brought this element into Strange New Worlds. Also, touching on the broadness of it, I think that works well too, personally, because for me, it felt very timely in the sense that like the thing that I thought about was trans rights and trans people and the persecution they're facing, and in particular, it feels very bad here in the United States. I'm not sure how it feels abroad, but I know there's a couple of Star Trek Twitter folks that in Europe who've also been sharing the prejudices that they've been experiencing abroad. But here in America, it seems to be like a hot button political issue, and there's all kinds of things going on with legislation. And so it just reminded me when Nira is talking about like why she loves the law and like how like a law sometimes isn't just because it's in play doesn't mean that it's right. All these things, like all of that kind of like reminded me of our legal system and how like if we don't participate in our government, in our political system, in the sense of like voting and being aware of the issues, and like like not just looking at what the political talking heads are saying, but going a little deeper, like maybe meeting trans people, talking to trans people, like going further than just what you see on TV, then we're not doing a good job, I think, as citizens. So it kind of woke me up a little bit and made me realize, oh, like, there are big issues going on, and there's a lot of laws that I don't think are just or that are antiquated. Like if we kept some of the laws, well, actually, in some states there are laws, that prevent interracial marriage still today. That they're still on the books. They're not laws that anyone, agrees with, but it's wild that like, these are the kinds of things that can happen. So I think it was a really powerful episode in terms of that, and just making me think more about how I can participate, how I can like be a bigger part of change, I guess you could say, to help people feel more included in our society, who are on the margins or who are on the fringes, if you will, in terms of what's considered normal. So I did like that it was a broad message, because like, the specific message is something that we can't really relate to. It's about people who are genetically modified,
Yeah.
so but I think that the trans experience is very similar, because while it's not genetic modification, it is a form of modification to make you more of who you are, like to reflect on the outside who you are on the inside. So it's an interesting
It's it's
idea.
such a good allegory because the Illyrians well, the Illyrians adapted themselves for connection to
To their
for that
environments
to
that they
be
were in or
themselves,
whatever, yeah.
for
And to each other,
be
right?
more of yourself, and,
Right.
the Federation itself is an idea of I got kinda emotional when Una was saying, that she was inspired all those people, from all these planets. I found it kinda funny that they cut to, I don't know, the briefing room, and we see mostly human characters, but, that was kinda
Yeah, where's that, like, weird guy with the funny head from Discovery? I wanna see him,
Yeah,
octopus
just like
head or
I'm
whatever, yeah,
unsure.
like like
But yeah, the Federation and Star Trek is about that. It's always been about, even we can forgive the budget for not having uh, crazy alien characters on the bridge, but even through the writing and the character backgrounds, and the personalities and the friendships that are forged, it is really a very, inspirational kind of, um, showcase of a community. And, even when you go online, maybe you struggle to make connections, and you go online and you meet people, and it opens your eyes up to how fantastic and how amazing and different people are when you go on Twitter and you realize, wow, there's a whole Star Trek community here that, I would never have found in real life. Um, and you meet people like Sohail who bring you on these streams, and it just opens your eyes up to
Oh my goodness.
how amazing people could be.
Oh, thank you. No, I'm not amazing. You're amazing.
But what I mean is we don't see that sometimes if we don't stretch ourselves, if you don't go out.
Yeah,
Sometimes
it's
even
true.
you go on a walk, you see someone with a cool haircut, you think, wow, that's cool. That's inspiring. Um,
I just tell people your haircut's cool.
no,
I've
no, I'm
never
not
gotten
talking about me. I'm just talking about, someone dyes their hair pink or
No, I'm
whatever.
just
You
saying in
think,
general,
oh,
if I
that's
see a
different,
person.
Or
Yeah,
you go
like, that's what
somewhere
I'm
in
saying
public
is like what's that?
or you go somewhere in public and you think, wow, um, that person in particular, they look a bit different. That's pretty cool, you know?
Yeah.
That should be the norm.
And that goes down to, like, I think one of the roots of Star Trek, which, Gene Roddenberry always encouraged or, like to say that Star Trek was about celebrating differences rather than fearing differences, and so when you train yourself or condition yourself, just like anything, in life, you get better at a mindset or whatever just by practicing. So it takes practice to start to appreciate differences rather than to fear them. So that initial reaction of like fear or repulsion, if you can like kind of manage that, get past it, and then start looking for things that are like interesting, like you said, it'll change your whole world. I mean, it's just a good way to like live. I think in general, you'll live with a lot less stress too, because you won't be so bent out of shape about about how people are living their lives.
And and
Like what you
even
think they should be
even
doing.
by meeting people who are wildly different from yourself, as long as they're good people, you're actually challenging yourself, to learn more about someone who has different interests and to kind of keep up conversation, even if you're not interested in what someone's saying. You're the fact that you make an effort, that you try, and then you actually think, wow, that's cool. That person's interested in that, and I'm actually opening myself up to something I hadn't really considered. Because,
Mhm.
when I talk to Sohail often, I don't I'm not challenging myself really because we have a lot of similar interests. You know what I mean? That
Yeah, I
can
guess.
happen. Um,
You challenge me a lot though. I'm just I mean you do in good and positive ways. Like I was gonna make a bad joke, but I decided not to. But going back to the episode, what was your favorite scene or what was your favorite part? I guess it was you were starting to tell us about it.
um, Let me think.
I'll tell you mine if you want time to think about it.
I feel like it's kinda hard for me to discern a particular scene because I haven't seen the episode in a while. Um,
Uh,
but
you don't
also
have the
because
recency
a
bias
lot
anymore.
of
That's
it
supposed to be
was
good actually
a lot
for
of it
doing a
was in
review
a
or discussion.
um, because so much of it was Una talking, it's kinda muddled up, and I'm kinda not sure how
I
to.
would have guessed that your favorite scene after the closing statements by Nira would have been the scene where Ortegas and uh, Dr. Mbenga are
I
watching
can't choose
Spock.
that. That's not even that could
Why?
be in
That's
any
such a
other
great scene.
episode.
Yeah,
I loved
because
it,
it
but that
was.
I can't
I
choose
love
that
that scene
answer.
so much. My favorite scene is the closing arguments that Nira makes. Like, I think that's just like a kind of like a picture perfect, just beautifully performed directed, written, all of the above kind of scene. But I have to say that like the scene with Spock and
Mhm.
Pasalk, Admiral Pasalk, had me in stitches. It's my next favorite scene because it was so it was so good. Like, and then Fathery over on Text Trek pointed out that it was cool that Dr. Mbenga could see the tension or like perceive the tension between them because we know he's a Vulcan expert because he was called in the original series as a Vulcan expert to help Spock, right? Like to was it which episode was it again that he was in? Let me
I
just
don't
check.
know the particular episode. Do you think the
Mm.
chapel is gonna go to Vulcan since they mentioned that at all?
Didn't we get the resolution to it at
Oh, right,
the
I see.
did we or is that the next episode?
Maybe, that would have just been cool to have her go there, but yeah,
I don't want to give away spoilers accidentally, but I could have sworn we got the resolution to that last week
right.
because she was like,
You never know, though, it could crop up that maybe they have kind of friction later, and she's like, "Okay, I'm gonna head off to Vulcan."
but I think he was supposed to. I think she's going to be meeting Dr. Corby soon.
Yeah, that should be interesting. Probably season 3, right?
I think so. Or no, it might be. I mean, it could be this season. I don't
Could
know.
be. We've still got we've got the Lower Decks crossover. We've got an episode where, um, Angel comes back, apparently. I'm pretty sure that was confirmed by one of the showrunners that Captain Angel is returning in an episode.
Oh, cool. In this season,
I
that
believe so.
means Cybok is going to
Yep.
be in this season. Oh, I'm so excited about that. Okay, cool. I didn't realize that. Anyways, Dr. Mbenga did save Spock's life in 2267. I just can't remember the episode. Let me see here. Um, let's see here. Everything when you what I hate about now if you type in Dr. Mbenga, you just get only articles about Strange New
That's
Worlds
kinda a
where
shame, isn't it? That it feels like it's kind of erasing
erasing
and it kinda well over time, because
it's not really erasing him, it's just pushing him down on the rung here is what I think it's doing, but okay. So it was either in he was in a private little war and that which survives. So let's see. I think it was a private little war is the one. Does Spock get shot? Yeah. Or does McCoy get shot? I think Spock gets
um,
shot. And then Dr. Mbega knows his where his organs are and all the correct stuff to save him. And we know that he's a Vulcan expert, so it's kind of cool that they brought that element out in that scene, but also just like I think Ortega's was hilarious in that scene, and also I just thought it was such a perfect Star Trek scene. It was really good, well done.
yeah, it was a
Um,
nice breath of levity before the kind of not serious, but I
yeah,
never felt
I
the
mean it was pretty
stakes.
serious and heavy, but
It was
yeah,
heavy, but I never felt the stakes because it's episodic, and we saw, was about in the trailers.
right. That's a shame, right? That happens. Like we never really think of it. What did you think about like Nira as a character?
Um, I thought she was brilliant. I think that she matched the kind of performances, um, of the guest cast, well, of the cast, certainly. She she could have a whole episode of her own. She was just brilliant. She kinda reminded me of, Philippa LeVar, from Measure of a Man. She had a similar kind of energy, and it was kinda similar in that she
Really?
was well, yeah,
I
of
guess yeah. There's like they don't take any BS. I guess.
yeah, straight to the
Yeah.
point, passionate about the law, um, and kinda there was a similar kind of vibe because you have Pike and Patel in the episode, and Patel has to work against Pike, even though she doesn't want to, just like Philippa did in Measure of a Man. Um, didn't want to work against Picard, but she kind of had to go with be objective. Um, and they both found a loophole. So I thought it was kind of similar in that respect. Um,
What did you think of the court scenes? Like, did you like any of the particular like montage sequences or the sequences more than the others? Like Admiral April's interrogation, or not interrogation, we should call it, like his questioning, and
well,
then also like bringing the crew on, and uh,
it kind of turned me on April a bit because he said, you know, he wouldn't have enlisted her knowing that she was
if
Illyrian.
he'd known, right?
But the point is, if that had been Pike, he wouldn't have said that, would he? And he may have
I
got
don't
into
know. I don't
trouble
know if they
for it.
either see, like, before they, I think they're being honest, or he's being honest, because before knowing Una, he would
Oh,
have
he
just
has to be honest
followed.
with the lie detector. I forgot about
Right,
that.
he has to be completely honest. Like, so if he didn't know her, he would have just gone by the law, right? Like the rules. So I think that's what his point was. Or was he saying that even knowing her now, if he had to do it all, like, that's an interesting thing. Like, if he knew, if after knowing Una, what would his stance be on like accepting a future applicant? And I guess he answered that question by saying basically like he would adhere to the law. And that's when I thought it was brilliant that and kind of cold that Nira turned it around on him with the violations of the Prime Directive being cited during his career. That was also exciting because we got like actual missions. Like we got like little hints of an April's Enterprise, and I've ever since I saw Adrian Holmes, the actor, in season one, I've been like more April. Like I want to see a flashback episode to April commanding the Enterprise. Like I would love something like that. Maybe it's not going to happen this season, but maybe it could happen next season. Or if Star Trek, right now we're in kind of dire times because they're canceling shows instead of greenlighting new ones. But if Star Trek gets back on its feet, or Paramount or whatever, and they start greenlighting new Star Trek shows, it'd be nice to get like a mini series about Robert April and the beginning, the first missions of the Enterprise. I think that would be a really cool thing. But anyways, I did like that Nira did that. It showed like what you said. It kind of turns you against April a little bit, like makes you kind of be like. And then I do like though how she used that, the fact that it's okay to violate the Prime Directive sometimes and make exceptions, as the very reason why at the end she says that's what makes Captain April and Captain Pike good captains, is that they know and they use their judgment. And that's why Captain Pike basically gave Una a contingent sort of like asylum at the end. So I thought that was very clever that Nira kind of tied it all in together, like getting the point across that like laws are not always followed, and there's good reasons sometimes to not follow the laws.
Yeah. Um, yeah, you're not going to be a good captain if you're just going to follow the rule book all the time. And, you know,
Yeah,
it's always inspiring to see the captain stick up for their crewmate, like Data did Picard. And, you know,
right.
b- it was kind
And
of
that's what was a
interesting.
little
Pike was
disappointing that, yeah. Sorry, go
forced,
ahead.
well, it was interesting because it was refreshing that Pike was forced to um, sit back and just kind of watch.
Yeah,
Um,
you could tell
and,
you really wanted to go in there and
yeah, he would have had a very inspiring speech. We know that much.
that was a good scene between him and Battelle. I love the two scenes. The one where he's preparing dinner, it's kind of scary. He's got a knife. I know he wouldn't do anything. He's waving a knife around while he's like cutting vegetables and stuff. But that was a really good scene between him and Battelle. And then the follow up scene right before we got the the outburst from Spock. Uh, we had that kind of scene where Battelle is trying to prove to Pike that why he shouldn't be on the stand, and she kind of gives him like a really like sort of a scenario, kind of interrogating him, or badgering him, if you will, into admitting something that would get everyone in trouble, I guess. So she did a good job bringing it up. I don't remember if we talked about it last time, but are you getting warming up to Battelle more? I don't remember if you were a fan of that character.
Um, I'm kind of warming up to what it does for Pike because it means he has more going on for his character, and that we're getting to see casual stuff. I always love casual stuff outside of, um, you know, space duties on the Enterprise.
That's why Next Generation's such a good show.
I still feel like we're missing. We're not even halfway through the season, but I do. When we started with Children of the Comet and we had that scene with the whole crew together, that was fantastic, and I really hope we get more scenes like that. It can't dominate the
Well,
show, but,
yeah.
uh, you know, we've got a bar set, so have more of those scenes like Ortega's making fun of Spock. Just it doesn't need to be all the time, even 5, 10 minutes at the start of an episode. How good would that be? And then you can just flow into your main story,
I
because
think
it
if the
does a lot.
show I think if the show goes on into its third, fourth, seasons, we'll get a lot more of that as they get more comfortable knowing that the audience will do that. And I like that, one of the things that like, that's both a positive and maybe a negative about modern Star Trek is that like the bigger budgets and the ease of doing some of these like spectacular things has created like shows that are kind of intense all the time. Like there's always something going on that's like a big deal. And I was reminded today, I was listening to the Pod Directive, which is the official Star Trek podcast with Tawny Newsome and Paul F. Tompkins, and they had John Hodgman on today. He's kind of a famous guy who talks about technology and other stuff like that. But he was talking about why he really loves the Next Generation. And I really vibe with this because I often say the same thing: is that like the Next Generation was just like so like as far as and it was a rule of the show is that because there was no conflict between the main characters, they all just kind of had like they were all just so professional and kind to each other and like really nice, but there's a lot of banter in that. Like there's a lot of like friendly, wholesome kind of seeming kind of stuff. Like you didn't ever suspect that Dr. Crusher was going to do anything bad to Counselor Troy or whoever, unless she was taken over by some like, alien presence or whatever, And so I think that's the difference is like now I think stories are more about character conflict, and that's a positive. It's not a bad thing. It's just different now, So like you don't have a lot of those cozy moments between characters anymore. But I think Strange New Worlds is the show that kind of does it the most, that has the most like of that vibe,
Of conflict.
of lack of like
Oh,
of
yeah.
more harmony, like
Strikes
of
a good
more of
balance,
a
like,
yeah,
yeah.
like they're more interested in resolving the conflicts between each other. There's not a lot of drama between the characters, you know what I mean? Like there's not a lot of like melodrama going on in Strange New Worlds, if you will. So I think it's kind of a return to that form as well, in a way. But also keeping the big budget spectacle intact because Strange New Worlds certainly delivers on that front as well. But yeah, it's interesting when you think about how like modern Star Trek, every episode feels like a movie, every series feels like a film. Like it doesn't feel like you're watching TV really.
I think it strikes a good balance because with a lot of older episodic shows, sitcoms like Cheers, you'd come back for the sense of a family, they're in a bar and they're talking about their problems, or Columbo, the story resets every time, but you're coming back for the charisma in the elite. And that's why this show is brilliant because Pike is such a fantastic, charismatic lead who's not over the top. He's uh, kind of like a farm boy, you know, um, and Anson Mount gives him such charisma. But also around him,
Yeah.
you have a very kind of laid back dynamic with the crew members that you can really just vibe with. And
Well, I would also argue that this season proves that all the actors on the series are really quite superb and doing interesting things, because we've had, like, less Captain Pike so far in these first two episodes, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, but I haven't missed him. Like
I
it
have a wee bit,
Oh, you have? It
but
doesn't
I
bother
think it's
me at all. I
important
think
for
it's
that, you know, to to to
I feel
diversify
like his
that.
presence is there, and I also feel like it's kind of like neat to have the other characters get more to do, like yeah, I think it's great. I mean, and again, I didn't mean that like in a bad way. Like I really love the character. Captain Pike's like my jam, don't get me wrong. It's like but I do appreciate that we are getting more of the ensemble, if you will. And some guest stars, some pretty good guest stars too, which is pretty exciting as well. So, which was something important on like the original series. I feel like you got a lot of guest stars on the original series, and TNG had a ton of guest stars. You always had like a cool actor come in and like do something different, and certainly I think that's something Star Trek does in general, but I feel it the most in TNG and in this show. And let me think, maybe Discovery season 4 was kind of with Tarka, the actor who played Tarka, but again, it was serial. He was like a guest star throughout the whole series, whereas in Strange New Worlds, since we're back to like a more episodic thing, we're getting a lot more guest stars throughout the season, which is kind of interesting.
It's ironic.
Like, sorry, go ahead.
It's ironic that you know, one of the first, one of the earliest Star Trek episodes was the Menagerie, and that was an episode that was made for cost cutting for because they didn't have the scripts, um, and it was a lot less developed. You know, one of the episodes was basically them sitting watching Star Trek. Um, but it was a courtroom drama, and from that we've got amazing episodes like The Measure of a Man from an episode that was just you know,
You're
a
talking
kind of
about court martial, right?
I was talking about the Menagerie.
Oh, the menagerie where they cut it together. No, but I think the big famous TOS episode that has court stuff is court martial, when Captain Kirk ejects that pod. Remember,
I've
like
not
he
seen it in a
there.
while.
Yeah, you probably don't remember it. You don't remember it, but anyways, yeah, you're right though. Menagerie also is a great tribunal, kind of episode as well. And you're right, they just did it from. I mean, they like if you've seen The Cage, you're like, oh, haha, like half the episode, or half the one part of the two-parter is all just The Cage, like they're just like kind of repackaging it. But I think, yeah, Court Martial to me stands out. But again, going back to guest stars, Yatid Badaki in this episode was just superb. Like she was a great guest star. Did you know that she grew up watching Star Trek:
Yes,
The Next Generation?
yes.
Yeah,
How could
okay,
I
cool.
not with all the tweets and our quote tweets?
It's true. It's true. I was so excited when I got wind of her a little ahead of the rush, and so I was very excited because I saw that show American Gods too, and she's on that. So
That's a book, isn't it? Neil Gaiman.
Mhm. Yeah, it's true. And interestingly enough, and I wonder if she would have ended up on Star Trek anyhow, because that's a show that's created by Brian Fuller, and Brian Fuller was responsible for the early development of Star Trek Discovery, and maybe his influence is still around actually, um, with what he had in mind for Star Trek. So yeah, it's interesting that it's a small community, I guess, out there of people working on Star Trek
And it's kind of funny that, you know,
that are fans also, that I should say.
that the courtroom drama episodes are like they are very classic and that they're like stage plays. They're theatrical. You could
Yeah, they are very
totally watch
theatrical.
them
They're bigger
in
than
an
the normal.
audience, you know?
They're space opera. I like to think of Star Trek. I think Gene Roddenberry coined that term, or maybe William Shatner, but someone called it space opera, and I love,
Yeah,
Star
you
Trek
know,
always feels that way.
it's Trek is often known, particularly TNG, I'd say, and DS9, to be very dialogue heavy, to be when they say cerebral, it's not like you have to have the highest IQ ever to understand it, but you can read between the lines, you can understand there's a message, and that it's not a lot of science fiction is just
I think
sizzling
Star Trek
action, pure
develops
character
one.
choices. So to have an episode, a courtroom drama episode that is a lot of it, a lot of people who are just that can't attain that can't maintain attention because they've not got an explosion or something, it would challenge them because it's
Yeah,
just
that's what I was
dialogue,
gonna
it's
say.
just characters, you know?
I think if you start watching Star Trek regularly, I do think it actually helps to increase your attention span and do things like help you kind of like grow your intelligence a little bit. I know as a young person watching Star Trek, I always had to look up all the scientific stuff. So I learned a lot about physics and astronomy and just science in general, but also a lot of references to literature and things like that. It just like really helped me in my educational journey as a youth to kind of explore things that maybe weren't on the school curriculum per se.
Yeah, and the more conversationalist kind of approach to episodes is more interesting because you get to fit in more dialogue. You get to if it's good dialogue, you get to fit in more stuff that you can actually think about or you can kind of relate to. Even in this episode, the first episode of a season was fun. It was kind of a bit more action heavy. There was kind of I kinda got bored of the fighting scenes that were a bit slow, but then this episode, dialogue, 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 and it's important dialogue that has reached out to a lot of people, that has left you with
Oh yeah,
something after you watched it, and when I was
it's
rewatching
exciting. The
yeah,
show
yeah,
is just as the episode is just as exciting as an action-packed episode because of the way that the story's unfolding, and like the what's going to happen. Like there's a lot of tension and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a brilliantly written episode.
and the variety in the show just keeps you on your toes, you don't know what you're gonna get, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can't believe it. We thought we were only going to talk for about 30 minutes on this episode, but we're almost over at an hour. It just goes to show what happens when two good friends come together. Uh, so let's kind of wrap it up. Is there anything that I missed about this episode? I think we talked about just about everything.
Um,
I guess we should talk about um, like the implications of Una. Well, I guess the thing is, you know, like you said at the top of the episode, that there weren't any real ramifications from this ruling. Like we know that the ban is still effect all the way up to DS9 and stuff like that. So what are we meant to take from this episode, do you think? You know, or what do you think, is there anything that you can think of in the future
mhm.
of Star Trek that may somehow like, you know, reference this episode unintentionally?
I don't really know, but I got from the episode that you have to be yourself, you know, even if that
Yeah,
means, um, you know, even if that has a personal cost, you have to just, you know,
be yourself.
unmask, um,
That's cool.
or you have to put
You'll be
loyalty
happiest when you don't. No one has to do anything they don't want to, and I like to use my coming out story. I didn't come out till later in life, not for any reason. I was very comfortable with who I was and stuff like that. It's just something personal, I guess, for me. Um, but everyone, I think, live. What I can say though is that living truer is more refreshing and easy on me than it was hiding, or like having to lie, because one lie leads to another, and you miss opportunities and things like that. And so yeah, I can definitely attest that when I was not living my true self, that it was a more difficult life than it has been since being my true self.
and where that came from was society, you know, it's just embedded within us. If you're different in any way or you think, "Oh, this is different, this is" you know, it becomes scary whether it's you know, I've been kinda considering whether I might be, um, on the autism spectrum, and that's kinda I kind of found that that was scary to think about, but I've kind of come to terms with it, and hopefully I'll get diagnosed and we'll see. But it's the longer you kind of hide something, I think that the more difficult it can sometimes be to open up.
Yeah.
It's freeing to open up. Um,
So I guess what we could expect uh, to say it won't affect. We know it doesn't affect Star Trek that comes after chronologically, but what we can expect maybe is a different Una this season, like something different about Una.
Hopefully. I was also
Yeah.
wondering, do you think that's eventually now it would be a terrible, terrible choice, but do you think eventually she's gonna leave, like, in TOS time because of this? Like,
Yeah.
something's
Well, I
gonna
don't
go
know if
on.
it's going to be because of this. That's an interesting idea. That would be really interesting if they pursue like kind of if they show us
'Cause
how.
that could be really sad. I mean,
Yeah,
also,
but
what's gonna happen
I
to
always
M'Benga?
imagine I always imagine that Una would get her own command.
Right. It's so sad when you actually think about it because going from here to
But there is going to be a
TOS.
follow to this for sure because just like Nira says, this is a start, but like when you think of it from Nira's perspective, all she did was like get Una reinstated. Nothing changed, in terms of the persecution that Illyrians are undergoing and how they can't be members of the Federation and all that stuff. None of that has changed. I
No,
wonder. Go ahead.
I just mean, like, it's kinda sad where you Chapel is this, you know, spicy, fun character, and she's gonna become really bland in TOS. You know, M'Benga is gonna lose
I
his
like to
chief
look at it.
medical position.
You know what? You
Um,
know what? You know what? The way that I kind of don't get sad about it is that I just think that like I just
Pike is
get my
gonna it's so sad.
I just it is gonna be you know what? Stranger Worlds is a tragedy, I guess.
It's such
It's
an
gonna be a
optimistic show, but
it's
there's
true.
so much that's coming for it that's kinda tragic. Roger
Well,
Corby.
we don't know what the show's gonna do. They're already messing around with, stuff that we think is continuity or whatever, the sacred canon, if you will. And by the way, I respect canon, and I am actually a person who studies Star Trek in a fashion that would be considered like studying the Star Trek canon or whatever. So I'm not trying to knock on it, but I do believe in the freedom of the people making Star Trek to do something bold and new. And so I'm kind of holding my breath and not worrying about what I just kind of want to see where they go with it. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. So depending what direction they go in, they might just end up changing everything, to the extent that maybe it's time for Star Trek to have more than one, outcome, or like maybe time is not so linear. We always talk about how time is not linear anyways. So maybe the story of Star Trek weaves in and out of time, if you will, and changes. So I don't know. I'm not sure what they're gonna do, but I would just say that like even with the known tragedy of Pike and what's his outcome and all that stuff, I still think there's a lot of bright futures. Like I definitely want we know what becomes of Spock, of course, right? We don't know what happens to Chapel when, we know that from now until the original series, she's going to meet and get engaged to a man named Roger Corby. And maybe that relationship is the reason why she's different in the original series and why maybe people treat her differently as well. I think we're going to get all kinds of interesting explanations, but I can tell you they're probably not going to be what I think or you think, because I'm sure it seems like Akiva Goldsman's really into this era of Star Trek and these characters. So he and his team, Henry Alonso Myers and everyone else who writes for the show, um, haven't failed me yet. So I think 10 episodes, they have a pretty good, solid reputation. So I'm kind of holding on to my what do they say in Star Trek Prodigy? Your the butt hanging bars or whatever. Hold on to your butt bars. That's what it is. I'm holding on to my hold on to your butt bars. So, just to see where they take us on this ride. But going back to Una, I do hope that the Illyrian thing comes up again, because I think it's not over the story. You know what I mean? Like, I do want to see Nira again. We don't even know what they were like as friends. We do see that flashback to Una's, past, which, by the way, that made me really sad for poor Una. She's got this like broken leg, and
And this
like
dark house, yeah.
yeah, it's like sad. It felt really sad. Um
It's difficult because this show could easily become so self-referential. You know, even Angel coming back, I love it because it's Cyborg. But if it was Angel and herself coming back, I'm not sure I'd be very happy about it. She was a fantastic guest star, don't get me wrong.
I
But
like Captain Angel. I would want Captain Angel back, but of course I want to see Cybok, like, and I
yeah,
know that they're intertwined, so that's kind of a cool thing.
but what I mean is we've already not got enough of each of the characters because most of the show is pretty Pike Spock heavy, you know? Um, and
And
so to
and
have
and
returning
that's like
characters
a
already is taking away from having a possible, you know, Mbenga focus, Uhura focus, Chapel
I
focus,
think, like,
whatever.
I don't know what you're worried about, like, well, I mean, it's a valid concern, but it's like, come on, there's gonna be hopefully
And
3
we've
to
already
5
got the Gorn coming
5 or
back,
6, there's
you
gonna be
know,
5
Kirk coming
seasons,
back. So that's
like
taking away from these characters
Yeah, it's
in
true.
a way.
I I haven't seen more Tegas yet, and I'm kind of miffed because I wanted more Tegas. And so yeah, we're getting cute little moments with Ortegas, but we haven't seen more Tegas yet. So I'm hoping this season delivers on the promise of more Tegas, for example. And you know, yeah, frankly, I think that, like, we're getting a lot more of these characters than you're kind of giving the show credit for, in my opinion, Robbie. I
Mm.
think you're being a little too hard on this show, considering that, like, if you were to, like, average out I definitely agree it's Pike Spock, like, heavy, and Uhura. I think Uhura is getting a good amount of attention,
Maybe what I'm saying
as
is that
well.
Pike and Spock have the most character development then. And although I love
Well, now Una, you don't think that, like, this episode's pretty groundbreaking
this
for
episode
Una
did
and
yeah,
stuff like
this
that?
episode did give a lot to Una.
Yeah.
But I'm actually at the point where, you know, I was like at the start of season 1, um, I really want to get a good bearing on Pike. And season 1 was pretty just from the stuff we got, the character interactions, I feel like I know Pike pretty well. And I feel like I know this Spock pretty well. And I feel
Well,
like
we
I
know
know for
Spock better than any
yeah, yeah.
character. I mean, Spock is, like,
At least in
very
this
well.
time frame, I feel like I know
Yeah,
this, and I feel
yeah,
like I know
and
s
we're getting to know Ethan Peck's Spock, which I really love, so yeah.
but I feel like I don't quite know Chapel. I don't quite know why she ticks. I kinda know Ortega's because I feel like she's a more two-dimensional character. She's a fun character, but, you know, she's more kinda quippy, not in a bad way, but I feel like there's more depth to characters like Mbenga. We even got touches of Mbenga Chapel in the opening episode, but that was just teasing me. I want more now, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, they, like, let us in on the idea that they maybe served together or knew each other during the Klingon War, so that's interesting,
But you're right
and
about Pike, you know, because I actually feel like I kinda know Pike now, and I'm actually okay taking a breath back. I love Anson Mount's performance, which I was missing a bit, but I kinda feel like I know his character now pretty well, and
yeah,
that's not even in a Pike heavy episode or anything, that's just over the course of a season. So I suppose by the
yeah.
time this show ends, we've got a good bearing of everyone.
Well, we could talk about this episode. Obviously, it looks like for hours and hours, but I'm going to wrap us up because we're hitting up at the hour here. So I'm just going to say my closing thoughts. Once in a while, an episode comes along, I think, in Star Trek where Star Trek like holds up a big shiny mirror back at the society. But in addition to that, like, it's just a powerful episode in every sense. Production, like the fact that it was set, you know, at Starfleet Academy on the Ready Room. They talked about how the sets had all this like thought put behind them, like the freezes behind the lawyers in the courtroom, like the little touches, like the little lie detector truth things that resemble like putting your hand on a religious book that we do in our court system. I think they do that in England too, right?
I don't
Or in
know, but the
UK.
sculptings as well, they were really beautiful, you know,
The
the
what?
gold sculptings.
Yeah, that's what I said. The freezes, the
Oh,
sculpting.
sorry.
Yeah, yeah, those were like amazing. So everything about this episode I thought was just like, and oh, the dress. We didn't talk about the dress uniforms, but just like everything about this episode felt like really intentional, really like refined, really just like intricate, and like it blew my socks off the first time I saw it. I was just like really, and I was especially moved by Yetide Badaki's performance as Nira, and I can't wait to see how this episode holds up over my lifetime, because I think it's going to be known as one of the greats. I think it's going to be remembered the same as we remember Measure of a Man or Court Martial, or and so on and so forth. So to me, this is I'm going to give this episode a 20 out of 20 a 20 out of 10. Almost it almost gets like I guess I might even want to just give it the famous Starfleet So Hail Starfleet boy unrateable status, where I'm like, I don't even think I can rate this episode because it's so good. So yeah, those are my closing thoughts on it. Over to you, Robbie.
Um, well, I'd just say I feel like when you look back at the great courtroom episodes, you know, I'm not too fresh on court martial, but Measure of a Man and the Drumhead, most of the episode isn't actually set in court, um, or on a trial, you know. Whereas this episode, I feel like it was a pretty good 20-30 minute chunk that was in courtroom. And that was kind of different. You know, because Measure of a Man, you've got a lot of back and forth between the ship and the trial and the space station, and then like that wee bar at the start where we meet Philippa. And the
Hmm.
drumhead is similar. Most of it is actually on the ship, and not when they have that wee trial at the end. So to actually hold your attention for however long it was, 20-30 minutes of straight up courtroom stuff was pretty great.
Would you care to give it a rating?
Yeah, I'd give it definitely a 10.
Fantastic.
Um, yeah.
So two tens, or one infinity and 110, so it averages out to pretty damn good. Good. Robbie, thank you so much for hanging out with me for an hour and talking about this episode. It was a lot of fun catching up. It was a lot of fun hearing your ideas and thoughts about this episode. Audience, sorry we're not live. I know you like to have live interactions. I do too. We'll be getting back to live soon, I
What do you mean
promise.
we're not live? I see Joe in the comments there.
Oh, you do? You see? That's awesome. I hope Jill sees this part of the episode. That would be cool. Shout out to Jill. Shout out to Bengenium. Shout out to Joel. Shout out to so many people who tune in regularly. Thanks for keeping up with us irregular on while Starfleet Sohail's become irregular. Thanks for keeping up with us, and we'd love it and appreciate it if you would give us a like, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and if you wouldn't mind leaving a comment about what you thought about this episode down in the comments below, that would be really cool. Robbie, is there anything you'd like to tell the audience about, or where they could follow you maybe?
You can catch me at Earl Grey Trekkie on Twitter. I've not been doing much to my Facebook group currently.
Oh, but it's a great group. I see a lot of
Yeah, I
activity
need
on
to
there.
catch up on that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
if you're interested, follow me on the Twitter.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and cheers, and live long and prosper, and we will see you next time.